Okay, good evening. Parshas Pekudei, a single sedra. Normally we have 3 or 4 ideas and explore them, but tonight actually there's going to be one theme, and that is a fascinating theme. It's Pekudei and potential. We'll see what that means, but I think it's worth just focusing on one theme this evening because it's some fascinating ideas. The Parsha really concludes the whole story of the Mishkan. And the hero, the main character, is of course Betzalel. The Pasuk says, if you're looking at the sheet, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The Pasuk says in the beginning of Perek Lamed Zayin, Vayas Betzalel es ha'aron. Betzalel made the aron, atzei shitim amosayim v'chetzi arka, etc., etc. Vayas Betzalel, says Rashi. Why Betzalel? Why single him out? Lefi shenosan nafsha ha'melacha, because he sort of put himself out, he put in more effort, Yosem Mishach Chachamim, and therefore Nikras al Shemai, because he sort of focused, exerted himself more than everybody else, Nikra al Shemai, he was Moshe Nefesh. Fine. Now, what's interesting, that is in Parshas Nosei, which talks about the day of the completion of the Mishkan, in the beginning of Perek Zayin, the next box, it says, Vahi b'yom kalos Moshe l'hakim es ha-Mishkan. It was on the day when Moshe Rabbeinu completed building the Mishkan, Vayimshach Osei Vayikadesh Osei, and he anointed it and he sanctified it. V'eskol Kelov, v'samizbech, v'eskol Kelov, Vayimshachem Vayikadesh Osei. Says Rashi, why Moshe? Vahi bayom kalos Moshe. Says Rashi, Betzalel v'Aholiov v'chol Chacham Lev also es HaMishkan. Says Rashi over there in Parshas Nosei that you're right. Betzalel, Aholiov, and all the Chachamim, they also es HaMishkan. They made the Mishkan. And why therefore are we attributing the completion of the Mishkan to Moshe? Answers Rashi, because Moshe Rabbeinu was Moshe Nefesh, he pushed himself, exerted himself more than everybody else, Liros Tavnis Kaldava V'Dava, to make sure everything was exactly as it should be in the Mishkan, K'Moshe Herod Bahar, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu had shown him on the mountain, La'Horos, to instruct all the manufacturers, and he didn't make any mistake. The question is, but we just said in this week's Sedra that Betzalel was Moshe Nefesh. So why does it say Vahi Bayom Kalas Moshe? Says Rashi because Lefisha Moshe Nafshe Olav, he was Moshe Nefesh. But Rashi in our Sedra says that it's Vayas Betzalel, he was the one who was Moshe Nefesh. So how come we mention Moshe more than Betzalel? Surely Betzalel was also Moshe Nefesh? That's one question. Also, why not mention in our if Moshe Rabbeinu was indeed Moshe Nefesh, so why not mention that in our Parsha? Parshas Pekudei, Vayakal Pekudei is the Parsha of the Mishkan. So if indeed Moshe Rabbeinu was Moshe Nefesh for it, why not mention that fact in our Parsha? Why only mention this in Parshas Nosei? And a third question, which actually we mentioned I think last week, is why is it that Betzalel's name is not mentioned in Parshas Truma? Because Vayakal Pekudei in some respects is a repeat of Truma and Tetzaveh. So why does Betzalel only sort of appear? He starts in Parshas Kisisa, but really he starts appearing properly in Parshas Vayakal. Why does he not appear in Parshas Truma, which of course is the initial Parsha which talks about the Mishkan? So 3 questions. Question number 1. Why is it that in our Parsha it says Vayas Betzalel, in Parshas Nosei it says Vahi b'yom kalos Moshe l'hakim es HaMishkan? Why mention Moshe over there? Our Parsha tells us that Betzalel was also Moshe Nefesh. So why mention Moshe more than Betzalel there in Parshas Nosei? Number 2, why not mention Moshe in our Parsha? If Moshe Rabbeinu was indeed Moshe Nefesh, then let it say so here in the Parshas of the Mishkan. And third of all, why is Betzalel's name not mentioned at all in Parshas Truma, that he only sort of appears in Vayakal and Pekudei? Okay, to understand this, we're going to make reference to a Rashi in this week's Parsha. Now, this Rashi is in the Gemara in Shabbos, which we mentioned last week, but I want to bring out a different point. Okay, it says Rashi in this week's Sedra in Perek Lamed Ches Chof Beis. Betzalel is called Betzalel ben Uri ben Chur lemata Yehuda. Also es kol asher tzivah Hashem es Moshe. So the pasuk says, Rashi says, also es kol asher tzivah Hashem es Moshe. He did everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had instructed Moshe. Says Rashi, Asher tziva oisa Moshe ein ksiv kan. It's not that he did everything that Moshe instructed him. He did everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu instructed Moshe. What's that about? Elo, says Rashi, Kol asher tziva Hashem es Moshe, afilu dvarim sheloi omad lo Rabbi, even the things that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't tell him, he intuited that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu had told Moshe Rabbeinu. And therefore, specifically, he did all the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, and not all the things that Moshe had told him, Betzalel. Why? What's that about? Ki Moshe tzivah leBetzalel lasos tzechila kelim v'achakach mishkan. Because Moshe Rabbeinu told Betzalel to do first the kelim, and then to do the mishkan. Amalei Betzalel, so Betzalel responded to Moshe Rabbeinu, Min ha'go'elim lasos tzechila bayis v'achakach masim kelim b'soichei. First of all, you build the house, and then you put the kelim inside it. Amalei kach shamaytim mipei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amalei Moshe betzel keloisa. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, whoa, you're right. That's exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me. Betzel keloisa, maybe you in the shadow of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, i.e., you must have overheard that conversation. Ki bevadai kach tziv HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is certainly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me. V'chein osa ha'mishkan techila v'achkach osa kelim. And indeed, that's what Betzalel did. He built the Mishkan, and then he built the kelim. Now that is a baffling exchange. That Moshe Rabbeinu tells Betzalel, first of all you build the kelim and then you build the Mishkan. Betzalel questions it and says, isn't the minhag ha'olam that you first of all do the Mishkan and then you put the kelim inside it? And Moshe Rabbeinu says, yes, you're quite right, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me. So the obvious question is, if that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, then why did Moshe Rabbeinu reverse the instructions? If Hashem said to him, you do the Mishkan and then you do the kelim, why did he reverse it when he spoke to Betzalel? And second of all, why question it? If indeed Betzalel was told by Moshe Rabbeinu, you build the kelim first, then just do it. Why did he question Moshe Rabbeinu's instructions? So those are the two obvious questions. To understand it, we need to do a Maral. The Maral's got a fascinating take on this. It says the Maral in Gur Aryeh on this pasuk in Ois Hei. It's in Shmos Lamed Ches pasuk Chof Beis Ois Hei. V'im Toima, says the Maral, O Moshe lo maloi tziva lasis hamishkan kaidem. Well, why, if that is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, why did Moshe reverse the order? Yesh Loima, says the Maral, the Moshe haya makdim es hakelim. Moshe Rabbeinu put the kelim first. The hari hakelim heim chashuvim min hamishkan. Because at the end of the day, what is the Mishkan? The Mishkan ultimately is the kelim. That's the ikka of the Mishkan. I'll prove it to you, says the Maral. Because who carried the kelim? The Bnei Kahos, that son of Levi. But the actual Mishkan, the actual structure of the Mishkan was carried by the Bnei Merari. So the Bnei Kahos were more chashuv, were more important than the Bnei Merari. And therefore, you see that the Kahos, the Bnei Kahos, were instructed to carry the Kelim because the Kelim are the Ikka. Yesh lahaschil be'ikka. You've got to start with the main thing. But in terms of practicality, Yesh lahaktim es hamishkan. In terms of practical building, you've got to do the Mishkan first. Because that's the body, that's the house to hold the Kelim. Next paragraph. Betzalel, Betzalel, who was in charge of the construction, he was the practical man. He understood that you've got to do it practically. What is that? You build the Mishkan first and then you put the Kelim in. Avol Moshe, he was sort of his bent was on the limud, was on the lomdus of the Kelim. He could see in his mind's eye the whole structure of the binyan, but he understood the importance and the role and the interaction of each keli. And therefore he had to sort of convey things as he understood them, i.e. the kelim, that's the ikka, that's the main parts of the Mishkan. But in the practical application of it was lost from him, was forgotten by him. And therefore, until Betzalel came and explained that to him. In other words, Bezalel's ability, his koyach, was on the practical building of it, and he understood you've got to build the Mishkan first. Masha'en came. Moshe Rabbeinu understood the lomdus, the depths of the role and the features of every single keli and the interaction with each other. And therefore his interpretation of the instruction was build the kelim because that's the ikar of the Mishkan. Fine. Continuing the page on the next page. Klal Hadova, the bottom line is LeMoshe bo hayediyah b'inyan haTalmud. Moshe's understanding of the Mishkan relates to the actual sort of the abstract theory of every single keli. Because he understood the lomdus of each one. Because that's the ikka, that is really what it's all about. But for Betzalel, his focus, his prism was on the practical building of it. He understood the instruction as this is how I make it. And therefore he understood the practice. Now, there's a sefer called the Parsha Moshe, which Rabbi Hartman showed me, which therefore uses this maral, this concept, to explain our three questions. I.e., that Moshe, his role was in terms of the abstract theory of the Mishkan, and Betzalel's role was to do with the practical implementation. Says the Parsha Moshe, Ho'inyan sheBetzalel huska b'asiyas haMishkan kfar b'Parshas Vayakel. The reason why Betzalel is mentioned already in the Mishkan in Parshas Vayakel, Aval Moshe huska b'asiyas rak b'hakomas haMishkan b'Chanukosai, and Moshe Rabbeinu is mentioned in Parshas Nosai when the actual Mishkan is finalized and it's complete. Ki Betzalel hoya achroya ha'asiyah b'poel shel haMelacha. What was Betzalel's role? His role was to actually build the Mishkan. Lochein. Therefore, when Betzalel completed the building of one of the kelim, for example, he built the Aron, I've now completed the Aron, tick. Now I'll go on to the next keli. And therefore, in terms of the individual kelim, he was described as being Moshe Nefesh for that particular work. Moshe Rabbeinu his role was on the whole structure, the interplay between every keli and the entirety of it. His job was not finished until everything was finished. Only when it would, when it's finished. Only then has he finished his work. And therefore, when it comes to the Lomdus, Moshe Rabbeinu, that is his forte, that's his understanding. And therefore, there's no need to mention Betzalel in Parshas Truma, because that's the abstract theory part of the Mishkan. And therefore, that's not his domain. Both were Moshe Nefesh, but each one had a different mission. Betzalel's mission was the practical building of each keli, and therefore he's actually referred to in Parshas Pekudei. Vayas Betzalel so'oroin lefi shenosel nafshei al haMelacha yosem mishar chachomim. Therefore, we focus on him on the completion of each individual keli. However, when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, his role is the abstract theory, the whole interaction, the interplay of all the kelim coming together, and that's only finished when you've got the entire Mishkan. And therefore, you only have Moshe Rabbeinu mentioned in Parshas Nosai, Vayhi b'yom kalois Moshe lahakim es haMishkan. That's when you mention Moshe Rabbeinu. So each one was Moshe Nefesh, but each one had a different mission, and therefore each one was Moshe Nefesh relevant in relation to their own mission. So that answers our three questions. Number one, was Betzalel Moshe Nefesh? Why not mention Moshe Rabbeinu? Because in our Parsha, we're talking about the individual kelim that were completed, and Moshe Rabbeinu's role was not yet finished. Why not mention Moshe Rabbeinu in our Parsha? Like I just said, why not mention Betzalel there on Parshas Nosei, Vayhi Kalos Moshe? Because that's where Moshe Rabbeinu's mission kicked in. When you have the whole construction finished, everything came into play together, that was Moshe Rabbeinu's role, to understand the interplay between all the kelim and the Mishkan in its entirety. And why is Betzalel's name not mentioned in Parshas Truma? The answer is because his role was on the practical building of each keli, and that's not what Parsha's Truma is about. That's what Parsha's Vayakhel and Pekudei is about. Now, what emerges from all of this is that every single person has a different tafkid. Moshe Rabbeinu's was on the lomdus of the Mishkan in this respect. Bezalel was on the individual, practical building of each keli, as we've discussed. Now, Rav Moshe Feinstein in Parshas Vayakhel last week, therefore uses that concept to explain a pasuk. The pasuk says, I'm in paragraph E, Ru'u kar Hashem b'shem Bezalel, le'chayr lo muven eich roim b'nusach acher zeh. We don't find kar Hashem b'shem Bezalel. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu called his name Bezalel. We don't find the HaKadosh Baruch Hu called his name Aaron and Reuven and Shimon and Levi. It's a very funny expression. It says Rav Moshe why. V'nireh, mishum she'Hashem yisparach she'nosen la'adam eze koyach, tzorich leida she'nitin loi rak kadei she'yaseh b'koyach zeh rotz Hashem yisparach. If a person has an ability, has got a talent, has got the wherewithal for whatever, he's got to understand that it's given to him by Kodesh Baruch Hu, l'tzorich Yisrael, l'tzorich kvod Shemayim. He has to use it for the sake of the Jewish people, for the sake of kvod Shemayim. Yes, maybe he could exercise his bechira and choose not to use it for that. But he'll be taken to task for that. Why didn't you use the opportunities and the talents and the wherewithal that I gave you for this purpose? Next paragraph, that is the Pasha Pshat she'atem roim beinechem ki Hashem korach b'shem es Bezalel, i.e. HaKadosh Baruch Hu called him Bezalel sheyaseh ha-mishkan, that he would make the Mishkan. V'harei milei oiseh es Hashem hadvarim shetzarech. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Bezalel the exact talents he would need to do this job. Umizeh yido'inon shekol odom bein shenitin chochma bein shenitin gevura. And therefore every single person, whether he has been given wisdom, whether he's been given strength, bein shefa b'brocha b'kesef v'nechosim, or he's given an abundance of blessing with money, with property, with wealth, hu rak kadei lasas r'tzoin Hashem. It's only to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And sadly, says Rashi, you sometimes see people who are given intelligence, and they're given strength, and they're given money. They're not using it l'shem shemayim. They've chosen badly how to use these abilities and talents and gifts. And they'll be taken into account. Why didn't you use the money I gave you? Did you use your chachma for the correct purpose? So therefore that explains why it says Ru'u Kora Hashem b'shem Bezalel. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the name Bezalel, i.e. he gave him the exact talents and intelligence and gifts that he needed to fulfill his mission in life. And that's true for all of us. Now, apropos to that, there's an unbelievable God. Because of course what emerges from all of the above is the requirement that every single person has got to question himself and herself, what indeed is my potential? What talents has HaKadosh Baruch Hu given me? What is unique about the opportunities and the talents and the abilities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me? How do we identify that potential? So there's an amazing Vilna Gaon. Take a look at the Vilna Gaon in paragraph F, which is a Gaon in Mishlei in Parak Tezayim Pasuk Dalet. Listen to this. Kol Adam v'Adam yesh le derech b'fnei atzmoi leilech bai. Every single person has got his or her own path. Ki ein daitem doimen lezel lezeh. No two people are the same. Ve'ein partzufein doimen lezel lezeh. No two people look the same. It's an amazing thing. No two people look the same. Ve'ein teva beis b'nei odam shove. The temperament, not just the physical looks, but the temperament and the makeup of each person, personality-wise, is different. Back in the day, when there were Nevi'im, a person could go to a Navi, the Navi would tell you, this is what your potential is, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects of you. However, when Nevuah was nisbatel, Ruach HaKodesh b'Yisrael, in lieu of the Nevuah, there was a Ruach HaKodesh. Ve'ish ruchoi hu yodienu eich li'isnaig. And each person gets a certain siyata d'shmaya to figure out what is it HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from me. What is my natir? What is my strength? What is my passion? Ve'ruach HaKodesh yesh lechol adam v'adam, says the God. And each person has this Ruach HaKodesh, this sense of knowing what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. So it's an amazing God, because there's a big question. How do you know what your potential is? You know, that Rabbi Tatz, in his wonderful book about the Jewish teenager, he says that you draw a circle and you put your strengths inside the circle, your weaknesses outside of the circle. It's a very good exercise to do. So you've got this exercise in self-awareness to know what your talents are. But the point is, says the God, that you just have to have an open mind and open ears and open heart to try and figure out what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from you. And that sort of, you will hopefully be pulled towards the area where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to develop that potential and to actualize that potential. To finish, the example I always give is the marshal of the examiner who's overseeing the art exam. And you've got two students who are doing the art exam, and they've got 10 hours to paint their masterpiece. So you give the first one their assignment. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. They've got 10 hours to do their painting. The first one has got to paint a beach scene with golden sand and a blue sky and blue sea, and you give him the colors they need to paint that painting. The other one has got to paint a beautiful autumnal scene with rolling hills and trees and mountains, and you give them different shades of green and brown to paint their masterpiece. You tell them to get on with it, and they've got 10 hours. They start painting. A couple of hours in, the first one comes back to me and says, "Hey, it's not fair. Why have I got the blues and the yellows? I want browns and greens like the other guy." And of course the invigilator will say, "But you don't need those colors. I gave you exactly what you needed to paint your masterpiece." That's exactly the point. A person has got to figure out what talents, what opportunities, what nature has given me that I can develop those talents to fulfill my potential and to paint my masterpiece. Finally, this is an amazing part of the Ger Rebbe. The Ger Rebbe says, you come to Tfilas Ne'ilah, the high point of Yom Kippur, the high point of the Aseret Mitzvah, the high point of the whole Elul and Yom Neroim period. And we come to Shemona Esrei, we come to the end of our final Shemona Esrei on Yom Kippur, and we're ready to say the Al Chaitz, and all of a sudden they're not there in the Siddur, in the Machzah. And you think, if ever there was a time to say Al Chait, at the very end of Ne'ilah, now's the time. And instead we've got the following tefillah. Ato hivdalta enosh meirosh, leman nechtal me'oshek yodeinu. That we can take our hands away from theft. V'noshav lasos chukeres necha b'lev shalem. Theft? What theft happened now? Why are we referring to theft at this high point and final point of the Shemona Esrei of Yom Kippur? Says the Ger Rebbe, you know what theft we're talking about? The theft of not utilizing the opportunities and the talents and the abilities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. That is the ultimate theft. And therefore the ultimate responsibility of each and every one of us is to identify what our keiches are, what our talents are, and to use them l'shem shemayim. And that really is what's going on in this week's Parsha. That Parshas Pekudei vayas b'tzalel es ha'aron lefi shenos nafshe al ha'melacha yosim mishach ha'chomim. Because his mission in life was to be involved in the practical building of each keli, and therefore on each keli he was Moshe Nefesh more than everyone else. He fulfilled his potential that way. Moshe Rabbeinu, however, is highlighted in Parshas Nosai because it's only at the end, at the completion of the entire Mishkan, Vahi b'yom kalas Moshe l'hakim es HaMishkan, he was Moshe Nefesh on the construction, the entire construction, when it all came into position, every single place was in the right position, and you have the lomdas kicking in and the interaction and the interplay between all the kelim and the Mishkan. That's what he was involved in, and therefore he was Moshe Nefesh, each one according to their mission. And that's why Betzalel's name is not mentioned in Parshas Truma, because that's the Parsha of the lomdas of the Mishkan and not the practical application of it. And that explains the baffling exchange, the Gemara Shabbos, which Rashi brings in this week's Sedra, that Moshe Rabbeinu understood the instruction from HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the lomdas of the instruction, and therefore the kelim come first because that's the ikka. Masha'en came, but Betzalel understood it in the practical application thereof, and therefore you've got to build the Mishkan first to house all the kelim, and that's how the Gur Aryeh, the Maharal, explains it. And really, this, as Ramosha says, the lesson for us all is to try and identify what talents, what abilities, what opportunities HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me that we can fulfill our potential, and Mitzvah Hashem will be zocher to paint our own masterpiece.